So same topic. Sorry about that. I'll let them introduce themselves in just a moment, but they're really representing the sales point of view. And this is a topic that, us as marketers and salespeople constantly kind of complain about and always trying to figure out how to make this a little bit more smooth and easy working relationship between the two. So we're excited to get their perspective on this today. Before I get started, hold on, I'm having issues here with my computer. I wanted to I don't know if everybody has joined Soar Marketing Society, but I wanted to just sort of give a couple second overview of what we are trying to accomplish here. Soar Marketing Society is a community online. It's exclusive and private just for B2B marketers. And the goal is to allow a forum for peer-to-peer networking, but also bringing you strategic learning and growth opportunities. I think there's some other communities out there that are focused more kind of on the tactics side, but our main mission and goal is to help marketers gain more credibility and make a bigger impact internally with the C-suite, communicating value, connecting better with customers, and ultimately just kind of raising the bar for the overall profession. So I know it's a lofty goal, but that's kind of the topics that we focus on are really meant to be strategic and less sort of on the tactical side, which is why we are focusing today on sales and marketing alignment. So if you're interested, want to learn more, go to soarmarketing.club/soar, and we'll put that link in the chat as well so that you guys can get a overview of what we're trying to do, and would love for you guys to join and share it with your peers, etc. So with that, I want to let Matt and Elizabeth introduce themselves, and then we'll kind of get started on a guided discussion on sales and marketing alignment from their point of view, and then we'll have an open kind of Q&A session as well. So Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Stacy. I've been in sales now for 12 years on the leadership side of things, and have worked with both B2B and B2C with marketing teams as well. And currently, I've just launched my own coaching business to coach individual contributors that have just moved into sales management. So a lot of experience on the sales and marketing side.
Great. Hi, everyone. Elizabeth. So I've spent a few years less than Matt in tech software as a service. I originally came from the people space. So I started out of university. I went into talent acquisition. I was a recruiter, headhunter, executive consultant, and then try sales. And so I joined my first tech company, Ceridian, back in 2015, focused within the human capital management space. So I was selling into HR, finance, people and culture executives. And then I recently transitioned, although it seems like a very long time ago. Last July, I joined an organization called Allocadia, and we are in the marketing performance management space. So our software essentially enables marketing organizations to illustrate the impact of their efforts and their work and how that drives impact in terms of revenue. We recently joined forces with an organization called Brandmaker out of Germany. And right now we are very focused on helping marketing teams plan smarter, be more agile, just in terms of being able to, again, the head of marketing or the CMO to illustrate the impact and value of marketing across the C-suites and boards and et cetera. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. I would love to know, how do you guys, Matt, let's start with you. How do you define alignment? And it's a term that kind of gets thrown around a lot. And I'm curious, like how you would explain that.
Like for me, like, because you're right, it could go a million different ways. But like for me, I always like to simplify it into who is your ideal customer profile? Who are you good at selling to? Who uses your product? And with alignment, do your sales and marketing teams agree on that? And do they agree on how to measure if marketing is actually marketing to the right people and sales is actually selling to the right people? So like sales is all just a math game, but a lot of people don't understand that. But if you just base it off a math game and treat it as a game, and your sales and marketing team agree on, here's who we're going after, here's why, here's what our conversion rate is it going up and down? You know what I mean? And just that to me is alignment, and it's simple because it's an objective measurement.
Great. What about you, Elizabeth?
Totally agree. I just feel like, having had that perception of marketing and what does marketing do for the organization. Traditionally, we equate to like advertising, the brand, the creative side of marketing. But again, from a quantitative perspective, now more than ever, marketing organizations and leaders are accountable to revenue, to impact in terms of bringing on new customers, expanding into their existing customer base. So for the most part, obviously you can't measure everything in terms of a return on investment in marketing, but we're getting better at doing that. And I think the one thing for aligning the two parts of the company is the metrics, right? Your KPIs. What are you trying to measure? How do we define success, right? If we can't measure something, we can't really know if it's working or if it's not working. So, for example, traditionally on the sales side, right, we are very familiar, and Matt knows this, that everything kind of accounts for activity, right? The numbers of calls or the number of dials, the number of emails going out, all of that is hoping, right, to convert into actual tangible opportunities, conversations with potential. The same thing in terms of marketing. Marketing, obviously, I think, is sales, right? But at a larger scale, right? Marketing is the part of the organization that is market facing, right? Marketing. You're marketing to your total addressable market and the people that you want to help solve problems. And I don't understand where the divide happened or at which point, because I just think that we're in it for the same reasons. We're doing, different things differently, but at the end of the day, it's like you're just trying to drive the same results, which is how do we get in front of more people actually benefit or value from our products or solutions? How do we keep them and convert them into happy customers who then can come in and advocate for us and be those advocates on our behalf? So I think it's just kind of a no-brainer. Like we're all after the same thing. So that's, I think, alignment for me.
Okay. All right. I like it. Matt, what do you think are some signs or symptoms of that organizations can look at, if they have weak alignment?
So I'll go back to something Elizabeth just said there, which was she talked about KPIs, right? You have to make sure that everybody's on the same page with the KPIs that matter and not like the crap. So like, I think when you start seeing misalignment, I think you see two things happen. You start to see sales blame marketing for driving bad leads, right? And then sales will tell you, hey, these are all the customers that are closing, going back to ideal customer profile. Why aren't we going out and getting more of these? And what is your process for finding these people? But then I think when you start to see bad alignment, you start to see almost sales and marketing fighting. You know what I mean? Which is, oh, I drove that lead, which then sales starts rolling their eyes. And then when sales gets set up and saying how great they are, then they aren't giving any credit to marketing. So it's a two-way street. But again, and I think another problem in this day and age is everybody lives on Slack or whatever your messaging platform is, and nobody talks. And I don't know how everybody else is with their significant other, but when we send text back and forth, you know, half the time my wife's mad at me when that's not what I even meant. But that happens on Slack all day long and nobody ever really communicates. And that's how you get misaligned.
Yeah, Elizabeth. Oh, go ahead.
Elizabeth, it's David here. I would agree with what you said if you believe that marketing's role is purely to be a sales lead generator for the sales team in order to close business. My view actually is a bit more profound, I think, than that, which is marketing's role is to understand the market and to identify, as we've talked about, the segmentation of the market and the needs of the customer, where I see sales as being a way of trying to provide product, services, or professional expertise to sell into that customer. And I think part of the challenge we have, and I've seen this over my entire career of walking this tightrope between sales and marketing, is that our objectives are different, but very few people recognize that, particularly in leadership positions. So as Matt's just said, the KPIs that you're given quite often work against working together. I'll give you one very brief example. I used to get measured on number of leads, not qualified opportunities, but number of touch points that came into the business. So I could generate 200-300 leads with no problem, but the salespeople didn't want them because they were very poor. And the reason is the management decided that that's how they wanted to measure performance. And my view is a lot of this issue and this misalignment is because the senior management of the business don't understand the two types of roles that marketing and sales perform. And that's basically the bottom of the problem.
And I agree with you 100%. And I hope it didn't come across as I pursue marketing to be the engine that drives, the demand generation, and that's all they do. I'll give you an example of like in a direction that we've taken that I think is going to be very valuable, is that we think about the sales development team, that function, that role, SDRs, right? Our new CMO came in and decided that the SDR team would now live under marketing. And at first, a lot of people didn't quite understand. And it was like, well, why should SDRs report into marketing? They're a sales function. But I disagree based on what I've come to understand, how the buying experience has changed, what customers, how they're navigating their process of evaluations and buy. Our SDR teams are the first touch point, that first experience most of the time with a specific prospect. And so they should be the ones that are out there having conversations, driving awareness, educating the market on how our customers are leveraging our products and services, and not so much about the pitch and trying to drive meetings or calls.
I agree. I think the difference is that marketing's looking at what the customer need is rather than trying to find out what product they can sell. And I know it's a subtle difference, but it's the core of the issue. If you've got people who are interested in selling a product and incentivized to sell a product, they will tend to not listen to the customer, but push the proposition that they have to try and fit it into that square hole with a circular peg. Whereas if you got it under marketing, we're taking more of an interest in terms of what the market is saying to us. And I think that's a different skill set in a way, because you need to be good at listening rather than projecting. Yeah.
Oh, well, David, yeah. But I by the way, I actually think we're all saying the same thing. Because
we're probably violently agreeing. Yeah.
I actually, so if you think about it, you're studying the market and you're trying to figure out, you're basically guessing to a point, which is, okay, this is the segment or this is the vertical we think that we should go after. So let's try this vertical and let's try this vertical. Right now, you give those leads or however you're generating, opportunities to sales. Now, I agree. The best salespeople, they're not going out and pitching a product. They're understanding customers' problems and they're getting all that. They're getting all the information. They're getting the need, and then they might see. This is where I think alignment comes in into. So let's just say you give 20 leads in this vertical and 20 leads in this vertical, and we get 5 deals in one vertical and we get nothing in the other vertical. Like there's not even any hope. You know, it's sales job to go back to marketing. And I think this is where alignment, hey, guess what? You were 1 for 2. That's not bad. That's actually really good. Now let's go get more of these. You know what I mean? I think where the misalignment comes is sales like, why are they giving us these bad leads? You guys are just trying something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Amazon's wrong 9 times out of 10, but the one time that they hit, you know, it's Amazon Prime or it's AWS, you know, but they're wrong a lot. So I think that's where the communication comes back is, hey, here's the plan. Let's see what works and let's optimize to what works and not do more of what doesn't.
Yeah.
Totally agree. And the solution I've used in the past is to pay marketing people and salespeople based on the other departments or division's success.
Right.
So there's skin in the game for both, because that tends to drive the type of discussions you said, which rarely happen if you don't have that financial incentive. Or, you know, and as an organization, it's sending quite a powerful message to saying, we believe the KPIs are so important that they're joint, and therefore you will be in a way forced to work together and discuss the different objectives and timeframes and everything, and come up with a solution which is beneficial for the company or the organization rather than the individual divisions or functions.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Stacey.
Again, I was just going to say, I think there's an added, you know, thing to call out here, which is sales is generally looking at the business from a short-term perspective, right? They have monthly or quarterly goals, whereas marketing is looking, what are we doing for the rest of the year or next year or 5 years out? And I think there's a lot of just impatience that happens. You know, when I see that, hey, marketing should be measured on the same things, I disagree. I don't think marketing should be measured on what's happening for the month or for the quarter. They need to help sort of understand short term. But if everybody now all of a sudden in the whole entire business is focused short term, who's looking long term, right? Who's the one that's looking out there saying, hey, by the way, this pandemic thing is happening. I think we should take it seriously. I think we should make changes to our business. I think we need to make some adjustments. If everybody's just so myopic and sort of short-term focused, nobody's looking long-term. And I would argue that marketing really, the strategic role of marketing is to focus long-term and to make sure, you know, that they're greasing the wheels or whatever that saying is, so that, you know, sales knows where to go and how to go.
And like I've always kind of said, you know, it's important to go slow in order to go fast, because once you do get to that point and you see the results coming from that long-term strategy, we invested in this, you know, campaign, or we drove this type of you know, whatever we want to call it, but this paid like 100 times, as opposed to us again doing these little things, piecemealing these little things, and then hoping that it drives, right? Reactive, right? We hope it drives, you know, leads. We're like, let's get this webinar. And then, so we have leads to give the SDR team. But that doesn't really always work, right? Because again, buyers know that potentially if they're registering for a webinar or they're downloading some sort of gated content, chances are there's probably going to be someone on the other side be like, hey, you know, like, do you want to call? And that's the wrong approach, I feel personally. I don't speak on behalf of all salespeople or marketing out there, but yeah, definitely something to consider.
Yes. So along those lines, I mean, can you, Matt or Elizabeth, think of an example of when you've seen alignment work well?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I've been with a company before where I met with my marketing team every day. You know what I mean? And the more you meet, the more you discuss, the more you analyze what worked and what didn't. You just make giant strides, and it's more like you're on the same team. I think they look, sales and marketing can look at each other as aligned, or they can be not on the same team. Where there was an instance with that company, and I happened to be running a call center at the time, where marketing would just run campaigns and all of a sudden my phone would ring off the hook and I didn't have enough people to answer the phone. You know what I mean? Then I get in trouble and I'm like, what's going on? And marketing's like, oh, we launched a national campaign and we forgot to tell you. I'm like, well, great.
Yeah.
But from that point, I almost looked at it as, okay, I got to get on the same page with my marketing team. And then you don't want to create enemies. You want to create, a partnership with them.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of April Dunford. I'm sure the marketing folks are familiar with her, but, huge influencer just in terms of positioning and, in the market. And the first thing she said on the webinar we did with her, as a marketer, your first thing you should be focused on is spending time in the field with your sellers, whether that's live on calls or you're listening to a recorded Zoom, either a first discovery call or the SDR, right? Their outbound cold calls, listening to the types of words that the prospect is using or how they're trying to communicate a problem or a challenge. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen enough. And again, everyone has their objectives. Everyone has, what they're focused on. But for me, from a seller's perspective, like I want my marketing team to be interested in learning about my takeaways or insights I've garnered from conversations with a prospect, especially if they don't convert into an opportunity, right? We want to be looking at why are we not able to convert from a first call, whatever the stages that you want to organize by. And I just think that ultimately, what we do really well, we see it in our customers, right? We see them understanding that everybody needs to come to the table in terms of marketing, revenue ops, marketing ops, even folks that are focused on customer marketing or customer success, basically driving, insights from across their customer base. And the other thing I have to say is that I think a lot of the challenges stem from the fact that everyone just kind of operates from assumptions, like assuming that why would sales want to know this specific, thing about how we're, for example, lead scoring, right? Sales doesn't care about that. Like that's not what they want to know. And I challenge that because yes, I do want to know within my specific accounts, the ones that I'm trying to drive conversations within, I want to know everything to do with intent signals, how people are putting up their hand, one persona within the account registers and attends one of our webinars, and then we have another stakeholder that downloads a report or a white paper. I want to be able to see that. So the visibility is really critical. And I think better understanding how we systematically approach an organization like an account is effectively what can drive stronger alignment. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about some specific actions, because I think you guys gave some good ones with, what I just heard, lead scoring. I mean, I think there's a balance, right? Because sometimes marketing can feel a little bit academic. And so having these conversations with the sales team, like buyer personas and value propositions and, the definition of a lead. And I think, being on the other side of that, I've sat through workshops and things where the sales team really was like, I feel like we're involved too early. What do you want me to do with this information? But I'm curious to know, like, what you guys think are some specific actions. And Matt, maybe let's start with you. You mentioned kind of this ideal customer profile. How does that sort of play out? How can marketing and sales really work on building that together? Well, and first of all, how do you even define ideal customer profile? What does that mean?
I can tell you what I've done in the past, is I look at, and I've worked with companies. I have a startup background. So I've worked from startup to kind of mid-level size company. So I haven't worked at an enterprise level company before, and I understand that's more complicated. But I always looked at, okay, a lot of the times, mostly it's an 80-20 rule, right? You have 20% of your clients spending 80% of your revenue, generating 80% of your revenue. It just seems to always work out that way a lot.
Mhm.
So I would always look at those accounts and try to categorize what makes them that, right? What's 3 or 4 characteristics that makes them that? And I'll give you an example. We did display advertising, where we would show ads, and I could back in the ROI based upon the amount of traffic that they had on their site, right? So it was a monthly unique visitor to the site, which we could find online. And then I could, average conversion rate was 2.5%, right? And then I knew what their average order value is, and I could back my math into that. Okay, so those are like 3 characteristics plus the verticals. We were good in 5 verticals. And then I would say, this is our ideal customer profile. So I would give that to our SDR team, which was compensated off of that scoring system. Okay, so like we created this SDR team, and none of the sales reps wanted to take the leads because they were so bad. And then we created this comp system, and then everybody was fighting over them.
Mhm.
So a lot of it is, you have to look at the characteristics of who are my major spenders, where am I driving the most of my revenue, categorize it, and then go find more of them. It's actually simple, but it takes some time figuring it out. And don't fall into the one-off. Whereas, well, we closed one of these out of 100, where the other ones are 20%. The one-offs is what drives salespeople crazy.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I hope I made sense there. I know that was a lot, but it's really trying to figure out who are my main clients, and what are three or 4 categories that you can actually go find more of them.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a really great point, because a lot of, when people talk about ideal customer profile, you can either go, what's reality? What are we selling today? Versus sort of swinging the pendulum the other way, which is fully aspirational. We want to be selling to these types of accounts, but we don't have any success there yet. That then all of a sudden it's like putting all your marketing energy towards something that may or may not pay out.
Well, and Stacy, to your point, like everybody wants to sell Walmart, everybody wants to sell Target, everybody wants to sell Apple, but guess what? You're gonna have to hire somebody at $200,000 a year base. You know what I mean? To sell that customer. Like, it's a longer sales cycle, and you can go out of business trying to wait for that deal to come in, which it probably won't ever.
Yeah.
That's not very optimistic, Matt.
Hey, I know from experience. Trust me, we've tried it.
Like, I think, and this is what a conversation that we have with our customers, marketers, is that this concept of like set it and forget, like you could potentially, as an organization, have not revisited your standard or personas since, I don't know, last fiscal year or a couple of years back, or maybe in our situation, right, with a merger acquisition, you're forced to then say, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. What do we know? What are some gaps potentially? And I think that what's important is like refine, get as granular as you can, right? So if I tell people, I work with organizations between 100 million and $1 billion in annual revenue. That's a lot of organizations. Like that is a lot. But I focus on 50 specific accounts, most of them high growth tech. These companies that are growing so fast that they're outgrowing their people, their processes, and they're expected to grow. They're expected to show revenue and performance, but things are broken, and they're trying to run these unsustainable processes. And so, for example, if I, as a seller, have a conversation with an organization that, let's say, is pre-Series C, let's say, Series C, maybe just before they're working on their next round of funding, potentially they're going to want to go public in a few years, right? They might have very different structures within their marketing organization. They might have more mature structures, more mature teams, right? Like, I've seen an organization with 500 employees have people focus on growth marketing, people have focus on revenue marketing, performance marketing. Like, it's almost like they know what to focus on because they've gotten so like granular about what their objectives are. And then you'll have like a multi-billion-dollar company that's like 10,000 employees, and their marketing teams can be completely different. So for me, I feel there's value in being able to go back to my marketing team and communicating, hey, if I'm working with high growth tech companies, then my personas might be different. It's not the standard CMO and director of demand generation. Some of these don't even have a defined marketing operations team. And that our standpoint, marketing operations is the backbone, I feel, for marketing teams. And you'll have companies that are ICP, but they don't have the personas that we're going after or the types of people we're used to having. So it's about being agile enough to change, right? We use the word pivot a lot, but in actuality, that's what you have to do. We have to like revisit on like a quarterly basis, if possible. Like, hey, does this still make sense? Does positioning and messaging to this specific stakeholder still makes sense? Is it resonating? So
yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's definitely, I do a lot of work on value propositions and customer research. And so it's interesting, how many times I talk with companies and I can't remember the last time we did customer research. I can't remember the last time we refreshed our value prop, and it became really not optional a couple of years ago with the pandemic. All of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, it was very obvious if you had your pulse on what was happening with your customer base or not. And if your messaging was on target and, if you were communicating value in terms that really resonated with what was happening in the market. So I think that's a really great point. What I know, Elizabeth, you talk about getting involved in creating kind of journey mapping or customer touch points, customer journey mapping. I mean, is that something that marketing typically does on their own, or do you think, sales should be involved, and how does that work better?
So yeah, I could spend hours on this topic. Now I feel more than ever, we've really become hyper-focused on understanding how our customers go to market to purchase or make an evaluation. And I don't know where the stat comes from, but Gardner, I'm not sure, don't quote me, but basically saying that the customer or prospect has done like 70% of the information gathering and research required to make a decision before they engage anyone. I can see that for sure. Like, I can see now that we are working with really educated buyers, like especially in marketing operations. Part of their job is procuring new solutions and adding to their tech stacks. And so for me, I think like the understanding that we need to do a better job of getting in front of our target markets way before that happens, way before they put up their hand to request a demo, right? Or give us some sort of, signal of like, I'm interested, like if that person. And then for me, one question I had was like, I went to our SEO strategist, our SEO person responsible for that strategy. And I said, can we get a list of the keywords that drives traffic to our website? Right? Typically, a seller is not going to ask that information. Like, what? But for me, because then it helps influence the types of messaging that I'm, implementing in my outbounds or in my LinkedIn messages or emails, etc. In our case, majority of organizations have never bought a solution like ours. So it's really about helping guide them through that journey. And what does that look like, right? We're working with organizations that, have different fiscal years. I have customers and prospects that, they're Jan to December 31st, or now they're just starting in April. And so there are different phases and stages of their organizational processes or planning or readiness, right? So for me, I think this is where marketing and sales can really make an impact, is how can we work together to get in front sooner, more proactive, right? And so I love, listening to some of our SDRs make calls, and, a typical response will be like, nope, sorry, I don't have budget for this. Because they're not setting aside a specific, amount to buy our product. This is rarely what happens. We have to early so we can help advise them, consult with them to build a business case why this makes sense now. So I do believe and I appreciate that there are a lot of people who evaluate our products that are really savvy and they know what they want, but rarely are they ready to buy. Demo request, I want to see a demo on the first engagement. That kicks off for us an in-depth discovery, needs analysis. It's pretty comprehensive. And I think being able to manage the expectations, for example, is really important. I think about, why should we still have demo request on our landing page? Why? In our case, we're not managing the prospect's expectations because maybe on that first engagement, when that SDR or AE ends up communicating with them or contacting them, they're not going to see a demo. That's just the reality. I know the cycle, right? And so maybe, getting creative and saying, even just a talk to sales, or let's explore, or
right, ready to take the next step. Yeah.
So I think for that, and then also being able to communicate to marketing as often as possible what that sales looks like. What are the communication touch points between each stage, right? What are we communicating? Who are we bringing in as a different stakeholder? When do we convert? And so I think that's important. Then we can do a postmortem and say, this is how we were able to line up these steps, and we were able to close this opportunity and bring it in a month sooner or a month earlier because we engaged the right people at the right time. So obviously, you can tell, I love talking about this because we're doing a disservice to our prospects. I truly believe, and I think that's why for me, coming from the sales organization, I've just kind of fallen in love with the marketing organization. I think about marketing from a seller's perspective, and I think about sales from a marketing perspective. And so that's kind of where, when you said, let's talk, I was like, oh, yes.
Yes. Well, let's talk. Yeah, I want to get your thoughts on content creation. And Matt, this question, I guess, is I'm going to direct it to you, but there's a, common complaint that I hear both from the marketing side and the sales side, which is marketing takes time to create content and then the sellers never use it. And I'd be curious to know, why you think that is happening and how to make that stronger so that ultimately what marketing ends up creating is vetted and relevant for customers, and also something that the sales team will be proud to share with their customers and all, and relevant sort of in the sales process.
When I saw this question, I started laughing. And marketers don't take this the wrong way. Please don't do this wrong. So when you start out, you're always, as a salesperson, you're always like, man, I need something to show customers. You know what I mean? I need something to show. I need a case study. I need this, I need that. So then marketing creates this case study or whatever content that talks about your company. And then you send it out. And guess what? Nothing comes back. And it doesn't mean that it's bad. But like if you're like a high-level salesperson, you also understand that it's not about your product in most times. It's about you. You know what I mean? So most great salespeople are more consultants. Like salespeople to me get a bad name. And that's a whole nother topic for a different time, which is probably another disconnect between sales and marketing. I've been in organizations where like sales was a bad word. I'm like,
Right.
I was like, what is wrong with sales? Like, oh, you sound salesy. I'm like, I'm the least salesy person that you'll ever meet, you know? So it's not that we don't want to use it or we don't use it. It's just, it really, like when people talk about personalization, if you send a case study out or a bunch of people are getting this stuff all the time. They probably don't look at it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But if you're, as a salesperson, you're talking about a million different problems and then the client's agreeing with you and all this, then you can create a case study kind of around that and share it with them. But it really has to be personalized to the customer, else everybody just cares about their problems is what I've found. They don't want to hear a pitch deck about how great your product is unless it's really going to solve their problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. I think that marketing does not ask for sales input when they're deciding what type of content to create. And the reality is that majority of sellers, I don't want to be generic, I don't want to be like generalizing, but we're reactive. We're in the field. We are hearing in real time what's going on with our customers, prospects, etc. We need fast turnaround. We're impatient, right? We're sometimes reactive. I know it for myself because I catch myself slacking someone in my marketing team and they're like, I can just see the eye, right? Like, so I think dedicating time to like a roundtable to say, okay, guys, once a month or once a quarter or whatever frequency, let's get together and say, or let's analyze, right? I was interested to know what is the highest performing piece of content on our website? What gets the most sites, visits? Okay, let's expand on that. For example, for us, it was like something to do with strategic planning. Let's focus on that. Things that come up in the sales cycle, marketing has no idea because we're not able to communicate. There's no channel. There's Slack channels, but there's no like process in terms of communicating that and sharing that feedback. Like, for example, last quarter, I worked with an organization and the CMO, this was the 4th time implementing our product. He joined a new organization as a CMO and it was like, I need the product. It's not even like, he was ready to buy, put up her hand, just, I know, I've been through this like 3 times already. Now he has a chief of staff. And it was the first time I'd ever engaged with a marketing chief of staff. And so that kind of put me on a journey to understand, hold on, I've seen like CEOs and CFOs have chief of staffs. What do they do? They're not a glorified executive assistant. I will tell you this. And so we worked with, she was a great champion for us. She was a mobilizer. She knew how to bring the people together to have these like discoveries. She brought, because she understands what his strategy is, what he needs to do, and she helps him do that. So for me, I went back to my marketing team and I said, hold on, we need to focus on marketing chief of staffs. Really, really granular. Like not every CMO is going to have a chief of staff, but if we can cater to the ones that we know of that are in organizations that fit our ICP, then let's do something, a campaign. Let's do something that speaks to reality so that they're aware. And so I feel like it's just, insights are there. We just don't have a good system of parlaying it back and forth.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I want to leave a few minutes for open Q&A. So let's just, if you guys can give one sort of quick tip, and then we'll open it up to see if anybody has any questions. But one quick, something very actionable that somebody could do today to start building a better relationship and alignment with their sales organization.
Get in a room and have a discussion. And guess what? You're gonna butt heads, but there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? Hear each other out. You know what I mean? Understand the other side. There's usually two different sides. And then agree on what you want to do moving forward. There's nothing wrong with confrontation. You just have to be adults about it and not, you know what I mean? Somebody storm out of the room.
Yeah, and a lot, I know that you mentioned, Matt, kind of, and I think Elizabeth, you just said this too, getting on sales calls or attending sales meetings. I mean, in my experience, not every seller is open to that, inviting people from the marketing organization into their one-on-one time with customers. I mean, how do you think marketers can prove that they get it and that they end up, being invited to participate in those conversations versus, hey, I just want to be on a fly on the wall and really not add any value.
I like in any messaging, sorry, Matt, it's the delivery, it's the context behind it, right? Like if we're, for example, sharing a piece of content, like a case study, oh, this customer of ours was able to get within 2% budget accuracy, et cetera. If we're doing that at the wrong time, it's no context. Like they don't care. Like they're not gonna, like, they're like, okay, whatever, that's great. That's great for your customer. But like, I don't know how similar your customer is to my organization and setup. But if you contextualize it, then it's more effective. So like, for example, for all the sellers out there that would feel uncomfortable bringing in a marketing partner into a sales call, I think go slow, like maybe start with like sharing some of the best calls you feel, the recordings at least, right? Or, I don't know, snippets. And then basically selling the idea of why a marketer wants to join a sales call to that prospect and a potential customer, and be real. Just say, listen, we want to be able to help more people like you. And we're really trying to be very intentional about how we solve problems that teams like yours. Is it all right if I invite, our director of content strategy, whatever, to our call and get their buy-in? And from there, take it from there. I mean, again, there's not one size fits all approach, and just start doing it. Just experiment. If it doesn't work, maybe it's the seller, maybe it's, that they don't understand marketing, teach them, bring them in. The one thing I have, because I don't know, in terms of what marketers can do now to get more aligned with sales.
Yep.
I came from an industry where career development, career progression matters, and they were focused on that. I don't want to sell this, but if you identify anyone from the sales organization that has some interest in marketing, like me, be creative and say, how can we maybe bring this person into our team? Have more people from sales transition into marketing. I think that's kind of moving forward. That's going to be a really good tactic for marketing organizations and companies in general. I think.
Yeah. Cross training and yeah.
Stacey, Elizabeth, I'd just like to comment on that because I've been down this route. I would strongly advise that you keep the meeting with the client separate between sales and marketing people. I think you need to work together on setting out the agenda and training each other up so you know the account really well before you go in. But what I found is that you can get into a situation where the client doesn't tell you the whole story because they need to keep the relationship with the salesperson going, and you don't get the whole truth.
Right.
And on a number of occasions, I've gone in to do case studies separate from the sales team, and the story I was given by the salesperson was very, very different from the story I got from the customer. And in fact, I got more insight from that because I was then able to use that to feed back into the organization. And there needs to be complete trust in doing that, because you don't want the marketing people to be seen as being checking up on the salespeople or how they sell and vice versa. So I would strongly suggest, though, that you get more benefit from having it as a separate conversation, because you can set different agendas and you can take it as a marketeer in the direction you want, rather than being led by a salesperson.
Yeah, no,
I love that.
I think on that note, it depends the context again, right? Like if I have, I'm engaged with a prospect and now we're doing our first round of product overview or demonstration, then bringing in like one of our product marketers makes sense because they want to know how sales is communicating the product use cases and things like that. So totally,
I get observing the sales story is vital. Yeah, because the marketing people should take responsibility for helping building the value in the sales story. I get that. I was thinking about customer need. We're going in to talk probably post-sale to an organization and go in separately just to say, look, I want to talk about the medium and long term. You've got your sales account guy or lady to talk short term and tactical. I want to know what your needs are, where your business is going, how you see our product fitting into your future.
Yeah,
that's a different type of conversation to me.
We have like a couple more minutes. Does anybody have a question that they want to ask or any other thoughts they want to share?
We've solved
it all.
Yeah, I've got one. I appreciate all the insights and the time, and it's nice to be able to kind of hear this outside of my own sales organization, because I feel like you guys can, be very brutally honest with us. I'd love to know regarding personas. You talked about, I think Michelle, like needing to be, or Elizabeth, sorry, needing to be refreshed frequently, and I'm trying to figure out like what part of the persona information is most helpful for you. I don't want to be overboard, and sometimes I hear titles are helpful, sometimes I hear people's roles are so different the titles aren't as helpful. But what kind of pieces of information on the personas are most helpful for you?
So again, coming from the HR industry, I go to careers pages and I look at the job requisitions, huge source of knowledge and insights, how they structure and how they communicate that role specifically, right? So a director of demand generation for a company A, could be very different or be more of, a more well-rounded depending on another company, right? So for me, like when the first thing I did when I joined this company, knowing kind of nothing really about what a leader in demand generation does on a daily basis, or what, how they interact and work in collaboration with other domains within marketing. It was like, I understand what that person does and put that as much color around that persona to say that, like, demand generation leaders, right? This is what they're tasked to do. Like thinking like how, we've just hired a new person in demand generation. We've onboarded them. Now, what is the first 3 things that they have to prioritize and address within their first 3 months? Because for us, there's a lot of mobility. There's a lot of movement that goes in tech, right? A lot of, people changing jobs and leaving organizations. So one of those things for me, I love when I meet like a person that's new to their role, because I have a better understanding of what they're prioritizing in their first 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. And that influences what conversations I'm having with them at that point. So I would suggest like anyone building out collateral around like enablement for personas is get as granular as possible about things like day in the life, the metrics, right? Their own KPIs, how are they being evaluated? How are they measuring success? So that we understand, because we're thinking from their perspective, like we're actually in their shoes and thinking about our product and use cases from their perspective, their point of view.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Like knowing that B2B personas have kind of two angles to hit all the time when we talk about value, which is what's in it for my company and department? What is this job I'm here to do? And then the other side is what's in it for me as an individual? How does this add a bullet point to my resume? How does this help me get promoted? How does this help me get, special projects? And so I think, sometimes some of that is included in the job descriptions. And I love that as a resource. That's a good call.
I love that you mentioned that. And I remember seeing your post there, Stacey. I include that in conversations with specific stakeholders or whomever is going to be the champion within the cycle for me. Like bringing on the type of product, like it's not just an anecdote. It's like not a high level. It's true. We've seen people get promoted and move into director VP roles because of that smart decision and how they leverage the product, because they were delivering these results. And so I assume marketers, so whoever you sell to, would love to know that the potential for them to progress within their own career and potentially have a better work-life balance and, all that, it speaks volumes and definitely something that should be communicated.
Yep.
Jamie, just to say one final thing. One thing I would always ask is, what is the largest value purchase order your contact can raise and sign off themselves?
Good one.
Because then you'll know what sort of player they are in the market and their organization. To me, that's far better than asking about budgets.
Yeah, good call. Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, this was a really good chat. I appreciate your insights, Matt and Elizabeth, and thanks for everybody's participation. This is obviously a hot topic, and maybe we'll do future sessions because I think there is a lot more to explore, and potentially we can go into depth in some of these areas that we addressed today. But it was very helpful to hear, how marketers can be more strategic and thoughtful when working with the sales organization, so that we're all, playing from on the same team.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Appreciate it. All right. See you later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.